Oh, such a good show. Mushoku Tensei is such a good show. Oh, I love it. Holy smokes. Episode 21 of Mushoku Tensei was absolutely incredible. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start with this episode. There was just, I'm going to have to like break it down minute by minute because there was so much stuff in here. And I think just like not really casual, but just passing comments have so much meaning in it that I'm really curious about with this series. But I think it's at this point now that if you ever see the title Turning Point, the episode's gonna be crazy. Because what was the first turning point? That was the mana disaster, and everything just kind of got flipped upside down. And it's kind of the same here. Not so much the placement of Rudy, but just everything surrounding him has been completely changed. And it was sad because when the episode opens up, I'm like, oh crap, is this the point in which they're going to essentially remove all that fear of death? Like, the episode literally opens up with Rudy's dying. And I'm like, okay, well, is this the point where they're going to have him die and then them just completely fix it? But I think the way they handle this is kind of similar to Reincarnated as a Slime, where there was so much cost to have it happen that it's not as if it's something that normally can happen. So if he does go later on, trip and fall off a cliff, it's not as if he's going to be saved every single time. They specifically go out of their way to establish the reason why he's alive is because this thing that has literally the most powerful thing in this world spared him. But yeah, oh my gosh, dude, this episode. It's like every single episode, it gets better and better and better and better, and I can't get over it. But anyways, so Rudy and team is traveling, obviously, and at some point they stay at some random cabin. They talk about these red dragons nearby. Eris obviously really badly wants to fight one of these. We get this little sparring match between Eris and Rijerd, and which is the point in which Rijerd finally calls her a warrior, says you can now call yourself a warrior. Essentially, her training's done, and she can now be a warrior, which is obviously extremely exciting for her, and she asks Rudy to pinch her to make sure it's real and she's not in a dream, and of course he pinches in the spot that he shouldn't be pinching. But following this, we get a little scene where they're still continuing to travel, and they point out that Eris really badly wants to fight these dragons, obviously. And this is the point where they kind of establish the dragons are really powerful. In most fantasy settings, yes, dragons are typically extremely powerful, and so in this particular case, they're equating it to the most powerful beings in this world, which is obviously the Great Seven. And the way that Rijerd puts it is that he believes that the lesser of the Great Sevens would not be able to fight a dragon. They would turn and run. And yes, the stronger of the Greater Seven could probably take them on, but typically these dragons run in packs, and thus I think he said only the top two would probably be able to take on a pack, and that would be the Technique and Dragon. And yes, this is where things get really crazy. Phenomenal animation, by the way. There's so many amazing animation pieces in this particular episode. Just the spell casting and all that kind of stuff. It just looks incredible. But yes, they're walking, and at some point, Rijerd and Eris both freeze in their track. They're terrified of something. And we find out later on this is the curse of fear, which anybody around certain people will be fearful. Which we later established that Rijerd technically has some of this fear within the spear that he has, which is why people fear him, but it's waning, so thus it's not that much of an effect. But this seems to be something in the play with cursed children, specifically, but it's a separate curse, is the curse of fear. At any rate, Rudy is not affected by this, obviously, and at some point, up in the distance, these two silhouettes appear. We later find out this is Orsted, and he is the dragon god, and he is with Nanahoshi, we don't know who Nanahoshi is, just a masked lady that's follow him. It seems like every single one of these, at least the more powerful of the people of this world, seem to have some kind of person with them with a mask on. These two pass them by. Obviously, again, Rijerd and Eris are terrified, and the ox decides to run off the cliff. It's so terrified, it just decides to jump off the cliff. Like it's better off wherever he can fall. But they don't say anything, and then at some point, Orsted says, you must be Rijerd, and so thus the one with you must be Eris Greyrat. And they're not really quite sure why he knows this, but they're kind of, don't move, don't do anything. But at some point he says, there's nothing I can do about it now, let's go, excuse us. And he goes to leave, but Rudy being an idiot. This is the point in which Rudy is probably going to kind of lapse back in his trust with people. Like he just finally, like casually, hey, how do you know them? So casually, and now from now on, he's not going to talk to anybody he doesn't know because this totally blows up in his face. But yes, Rudy asks, how do you know them? He says, I don't know them yet, which is an odd thing to say, seemingly that he knows somebody in the future possibly. But this is where things get weird, because he asks, I don't know who you are. Who are you? And Rudy says, I'm Rudy Grey Rat. And he says, wait, so which of the Grey Rat family branches are you? And he says, I am the son of Paul Grey Rat. And Orsted says specifically that he doesn't have a son. He only has 2 daughters. Key thing here. He hasn't met Eris or Rizurd yet, and he claims that Paul should have only had 2 daughters. So it thus implies that, at least from what I'm getting from this, is that the dragon god, or Orsted, has some ability to see things, to see the future and whatnot. Similar to the man god. The man god can see how things are going to play out, and he's giving Rudy information to kind of apply to this. But because he doesn't know who Rudy is, and he claims that Paul only has 2 daughters, thus means that he can't see the actions of the man god, or specifically anybody that's reincarnate. So the idea of Rudy being placed in here is changing things and is unseen by them. Thus implies the reason why Rudy was brought to this world is probably because of a conflict between the different gods. And so to bring somebody from another world is unseen, and thus something that is sort of a bad thing. And this is obviously, that in play with the fact that he later stupidly admits that he knows the man god, is why the dragon god would want to get rid of him. Again, it's kind of putting all these things into play to really establish that Rudy is kind of this outsider that is kind of shifting things, and it's probably not to the like of a lot of the gods. But at this point, Orsted asks him, why are you looking me in the eyes? And Rudy's like, well, they're really scary eyes. But Rudy asks him if he knows anything about the mana disaster, and he's like, no, I don't. But then just as it seems like he's going to stop this whole thing, and Rudy's like, okay, well, sorry, thank you, walk away, the guy asks, do you know about the man god? And Rudy stupidly turns around and says, oh yeah, I know him. He appears in my dreams every single night. And that's when, Orsted goes to attack him, which, he kind of foresees that he's going to be stabbed. Rizurd jumps in the middle, blocks it, and just, everything just goes to crap. It seems like even though Rizurd is fighting back, and let's make note here. Let's stop right here and take note. We had flagged this a long time ago. Like way back when they first seen this monument for the Great Seven, Rudy said, I hope we never run into one of these things because I don't think Rizurd would be able to handle it. We'd probably end up dead. There's our flagging right there. And I think I specifically remember people noting this in the comments, so thanks for the spoilers. The moment we're going to run into this, things are going to go downhill, which I think technically at the time I joked about the idea that this was an absolute flag. Like the moment they're gonna run into somebody, and Rizurd's going to get taken down. But this is really cool because Rizurd, even though he's like doing these really incredible attacks, the guy's just literally deflecting it with his hand, like boop, 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 like in slow motion. He gets knocked down. Rudy's going to get taken out. Eris runs in. He literally just grabs her blade and knocks her back. He does note that he believes that Eris has grown a lot. Again, whether he is specifically been watching Eris, he did mention, I can't do anything about this yet, but it does seem like he's been watching Eris, but he's noting that her growth has been significant. I think this is playing into that whole seeing the future thing and all the things being put into play. That it kind of implies that the future that they see involves Eris eventually becoming strong and being involved in some big fight later on that he doesn't need to, deal with right now. But again, they would not see Rudy in that picture because it seems like Rudy is unseen by the gods because he's an anomaly brought in, or maybe just the fact that he is involved with the man god. But yeah, as he brings Rudy down to pretty much his knees, he says, as you die, make sure to tell the man god that I, Orsted, will kill him. It was cool. Even despite being knocked down, Eris is still like continuously trying to fight him, like continuously trying to cast something. Rudy tries to cast some spells, but he's using some kind of obstruction to stop him. At some point, he builds up like some big, huge ball of mana that he shoots at Orsted, and Orsted has to use some kind of worm frost something, and it kind of absorbs it. But he does claim at that point that his mana capability is like huge, and that he would be equal to that of Lapas. At this point, Nanahashi says something to the effect that, something's bothering her, like maybe he is, and it like cuts it off. And then this is when we fade out, and Rudy meets the man god again. Has this big old gaping hole, and is like, you don't look too good. Well, I got a big hole in my chest. And this is where we get a lot of insight between the man god and Orsted, or the dragon god. As Rudy obviously asks, what the heck did you do to this guy? Why does he hate you so much? He's like, well, obviously because he's a bad god and I'm a good god, so obviously he doesn't want me. And even though Rudy's like, well, why would you not see this coming and have told me this was going to happen? He's like, well, I can't see the dragon god. Everything that the future of him, I cannot see. And it's interesting because it doesn't necessarily say it's because he is a god, like he's the dragon god. It specifically says it's because he's a cursed child. And again, we talked about the cursed children previously when it came to this prince, and that he was, super powerful when he was born. So it kind of insinuates that anybody that is born as a cursed child will be unseen by the gods. And he also knows that he has an additional curse. It says that he has 3 additional curses, and one of those is specifically fear. That's why, Eris and Rejerd were stuck in place, and he wonders why didn't I get affected by that? And he's like, well, it's probably because you're from another world. Again, establishing these kind of differences in Rudy with anybody else. And then they continue to add more of the cursed children to the mix as we talk about, Rejerd. So does that mean Rejerd is a cursed child? No. Rejerd is not a cursed child. He has his power because of the spear that was given to him by Laplace. And he mentions the idea that Laplace instilled his own fear into the spears that he gave to the Superds. And that his power is waning. And it did additionally because they cut his hair, which was green, just like Laplace. So everything's just kind of unfolding right now. It's so crazy. There's so much just in these few sentences. I mean, we've established that essentially the only reason that the Superds had green hair, that people fear so much, green hair and the emblem, is because Laplace, who had green hair and had this curse of fear, imbued this fear into the spears that he gave the Superds. Which then makes me wonder if there's any connection to that in Sylvie. Any connection whatsoever with Laplace and Sylphie at this point. Which was just nice because what this conversation turns into is, the fear is fading, and plus the opinions that people have of the Superds, or at least Rejerd, has been improved because of the action that he's taken. So the image of Rejerd is a lot better than it was before, which Rudy to this point realizes, okay, at least it's not for, it wasn't for nothing. At least I covered something. Despite the fact that as he was, having his dying breath over here, he was upset that the one thing that he wanted to do so badly before he died, he couldn't do, which was to fulfill the promise with Eris. In the final bit of this conversation, we really kind of cover, I guess, the power levels we have here. As he points out that the dragon god, this Orsted guy, is extremely powerful. He's wondering why the man god claims that he is the most powerful. He's like, well, wait, the technique god is the number 1. Why would that be? And he said, well, if they ever fought, he would win because he literally has the power to destroy the world. But he has a curse that's preventing him from using that power, which that gives me a lot of questions as to what exactly establishes that technique is number 1. Is there something else there? Technically, you're calling him technique. So it might be a fact that if he has more skill than Orsted, Orsted has power. So if there was a fight, the power would overcome the technique because he would literally destroy the world. He would win. But interesting to note that there's some sort of power, some sort of curse that's preventing Orsted from being even more powerful than he already is. But yeah, this is the point in which Rudy's like, okay, well, I'm done. I guess I failed. I'm dead. So what now? Kind of thing. I'd expect him to kind of walk around and go, so what do I do now? But no, man god obviously is like, nope, you're not dead yet. You don't have no hole in your belly. You're good. And that's when he pops back to life, into the lap pillow of Eris, which obviously she's happy that he's alive. It was so cute. He hugs her and she gets a little mad, but she's super happy that he survived. Rejerd's unconscious. He asks what happened, and Eris kind of points out the fact that the girl that was with him, Nanahoshi, said something, and then he healed his wound. Again, back to that last comment that we seen just before he loses consciousness, Nanahoshi, this masked woman, says something to the effect of something's bothering her and that maybe he is, ? And that really does have my interest really piqued, because what has me really curious at this point was the fact that back when we first kind of had this conversation between Rudy and the man god, the question that he had pretty much right off the bat was, well, who brought me here? Are you the one that brought me here? And the man god specifically said, no, that's something that the dragon god, the wicked dragon god, is better at. So I'm really curious as to what happened here. So obviously the dragon god doesn't seem to know who Rudy is, but the Nanahoshi next to him says something's not right. Maybe he's... Which, at this point, what I'm theorizing is the dragon god doesn't know who Rudy is. But he might know that he brought somebody from another world. Because all that the man god has said is the only thing that can do is move people around in the six-sided world. But the dragon god is better equipped to do something where you bring somebody from another world. He has a lot of power. That might be something in that power to isekai people to the world. Maybe Nanahoshi realized that this guy is kind of an anomaly. He's very powerful. He can do incantationless spells. You don't know who he is. You claim that you had, only 2 daughters to Paul. Maybe this guy is exactly who you brought over. Maybe she realized, wait, this is the guy that you transferred over. You just don't realize it yet. And that would explain why he would go out of his way to come over and heal him, is because he realizes this was the piece that I brought into this chessboard. I just didn't know where it went. Which makes me wonder, at some point he's going to run into Orchid again, and Orchid's going to tell him, look, I brought you here. Now it's time to kill the man god. So the easiest way that he can get to the man god is using Rudy, who seems to be being played with by the man god. Which is interesting that the man god, if this is the case that the dragon god brought him here, the man god would know that maybe Rudy was brought over by him and wants to manipulate him to be in his favor. I just don't really see any reason why they would, spare him. Like, what did Nanahoshi see in that would sway the dragon god to save his life? But yeah, just super crazy episode. I'm still trying to get over this. We definitely, me and Chris will probably be doing a podcast episode this week just to talk about this episode, because so many stuff in there, and I'm curious to see what his opinions on a lot of the stuff is that I'm theorizing on is going to be. Again, did the dragon god bring him there? Just doesn't know who he is. It would be odd that he wouldn't assume that it might be him based on the weird information he's getting. But I mean, somebody can just claim, hey, I'm the son of this person. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're, again, a isekai or something like that. But yeah, I think the only thing that this kind of leaves me at is realizing how incredible this show is, and we only have, unfortunately, 2 more episodes of it, so get ready. Get ready for 2 more episodes and then await, because can't get enough of this show. So incredible. Love it to death. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like down below, comment, let me know what's the episodes, subscribe if you haven't already, share this video if you can, support us on Patreon if you can. Definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.